Hello, and welcome to this month's Technology Talk. I'm your host, Billy Talley, CEO of Teleconnect. Last month, we talked about SD-WAN, and this month, we've got Michael Cook of T-Mobile joining us to talk about technology in the transportation industry. How are you today, Michael?
Oh, great. Thanks for having me on.
Hey. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to this point where we are today.
Yeah, I'm actually based out of Pensacola, Florida. I was born and raised here. Moved away, came back. Moved away, came back. Um, but over the last probably 8 years or so, I've worked in the transportation industry, providing technology solutions to them. And so it's really been a very interesting time because so much has changed in the industry. There was a time where I moved out to Houston probably about 10 years ago. And 6 years ago, I left the position that I was in to sell a fleet management software almost exclusively to trucking companies around the time of the ELD mandate, which was really the electronic login device mandate. And that was really a great time to be in that field and in that industry because so much change was going on there. That I often, when you look at the trucking industry before those years, technology was almost non-existent in the cab of a truck for a couple different reasons. But nowadays, if you sit in the cab of a tractor trailer, there's a lot of connectivity in there. And with that, it brought about a lot of change in the day-to-day operations of what a driver has to do, as well as all the staff in the office and safety and operations and administration. So it was really a game changer and really a catalyst in that industry. Like I said, it was I like to use this as an example. There was a company that we worked with out in Houston, had a lot of trucks, several hundred trucks. And up until that point, the owner of that company still had his emails printed off and put on his desk every morning. And that really stuck with me because that's really where the industry was at that time. And then, as we know, 2016, 2017, and 2018, everything changed, and the drivers were like that as well. So, a lot of the drivers still had flip phones. Almost never saw, a tablet or a dash cam or any of those things in the cab of the vehicle. So it was a lot of fun, working with the companies to help them through that. But having to help a driver that is used to just using a flip phone for his calls to to connecting a GPS and then doing everything from a touchscreen on a tablet. There's a lot of training involved in that, but like I said, now fast forward, what are we, 6, 7 years after that, and technology. I feel like now the trucking industry is one of the most technology heavy industries, especially with the truck drivers themselves and the vehicles. But yeah, over that time, over the last 6 or 7 years, what was interesting was the change in mindset of the folks using the technology and the folks in the office that were kind of overseeing it. And what I saw was, because of the mandate, there was a time and date placed on when trucking companies had to transition from doing paper logs to electronic logs. And anybody that was in the industry at that time knows how apprehensive everyone was about it. There was a lot of uncertainty about whether it was even, if that mandate was going to pass or not. But about that time, the latter part of that year, and as we started to train the drivers on how to use it, train the office staff on how to do what they needed to do from a compliance standpoint, administrative standpoint, everything very quickly changed. And it was my thought process, I can remember during the summer before the mandate went through, that I just kind of had this epiphany that once trucking companies had to embrace this new technology, the next question was going to be, well, what else can we do with it? Right. And that was almost exactly what happened within about 2 years. Everyone, I think, had gotten used to using the electronic logs and the processes that it automated. And the next thing almost immediately was around dash cams. Right. And I think that, in my opinion, the dash cams, it was much easier. It was much easier for them to adopt that because of the ELD mandate. And, as we've seen over here over the last couple of years, it's gone from ELD to dash cams to now automating processes and applications on those devices to help improve business processes. So it's been, it's been such a change, that I think that the change has been good for a couple different reasons. But one, in the
So,
trucking industry, I'm sorry, go ahead.
so what are the some of the products and applications that you see coming out now that and the benefits of those for?
Right. So I think the first benefit that was seen immediately was how quickly information could get from off the road and into the office, right? Um,
Great.
Especially around products like IFTA. I think that was the silver lining when folks had an issue, I guess, adopting to the new technology. The one thing that was of great benefit was the ability to automate the IFTA process. By doing that, you had all the miles gathered, where in which state they were driven in, where the gas was purchased. Um, you can even take your fuel card purchases. You can even take your fuel card purchases and match those together, and it gives you a whole report so that you can submit your IFTA. And what often would happen before is, if it was done on paper, paper gets coffee stains, paper gets lost, and generally you wouldn't get that back until the driver came back off the road over the weekend or before the weekend, right? And so that's a very good, I guess, example, because before that paperwork would be at least 3, 4, 5 days behind, and even being able to for the office staff to even be able to start helping the driver put all that together, where as soon as they put the electronic log in there, they had it almost instantly, right? So the really, I think the ELD itself, when you just talk about that, that's a government compliance thing. So they all kind of have to do the same thing, right? Like log the miles, log the time, and all of that. But the question is, well, what other data is it gathering? And what processes can we automate with that? And so, the market got flooded, I think, with a lot of different applications. So, when you have the hardware now in the truck, as far as 5G products, you have the device that plugs into the truck, you have the tablet or smartphone, right? You have a dash cam. In a lot of cases, companies provide Wi-Fi or hotspots or small routers to go to provide connectivity for all of the different devices. And been talking a lot about ELDs, but since this, I would say in the last 5 years, the cost to track assets like trailers and containers has really come down. When I first got into the industry, you were looking at nothing less than $20 a month and several $100s for a asset tracker. That application alone. I'm sorry, go ahead, Billy.
The merchandise. I've seen some monitors out there that monitor when the doors are opened. So.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and the IoT space, in which what you're able to do, like even tracking humidity or temperature, right? For companies that use reefers that are, that are carrying beverages or things that need to stay cold, food, things of that nature, right? Those the Internet of Things allow those things to happen. So generally, like in an asset tracking device or something like that, you can put those in and it can monitor those temperatures and you can see all of that stuff real time. So what all of these products do, what all of the applications do, is it's able to give real-time access and a real-time view, almost as if you were riding shotgun with your driver, right? You can know as much as your driver knows in an instant without having to wait for that driver to return back to the terminal.
Okay. And tell us a little bit about the T-Mobile network and how you see that benefiting trucking companies today rather than back in 2017, 18.
Right. So connectivity, whenever one is shopping for any of these products, you're really looking at the hardware. You're thinking about the experience or the application, the ease of use, and the connectivity is kind of an afterthought. Um, Most of the providers have relationships with any of the large carriers, and it's really tough to stay up to date. And when you're looking at a map, depending on where you do business, right? So you have regional carriers, you have nationwide carriers. So coverage is very important. Um, T-Mobile. So just to give you a back up just a couple steps here, I actually started my career in with Nextel, then with Sprint, and now with T-Mobile. So I've been part of a couple different companies, and I've seen how the coverage landscape has changed. And upon returning back to wireless shortly after COVID, I myself had no idea how much T-Mobile had invested in their 5G network. I had left wireless with Sprint, and during that time, the acquisition happened, and it was truly amazing coming back into wireless and seeing the download speeds that were possible with 5G. Right, I'm talking about rural America. Today, for example, I was driving down I-10 from Pensacola to Mobile, and on my cell phone, I was pulling down almost a gig. I think I was pulling download speeds about 800 megabytes per second, right? So on an interstate in the middle of nowhere, no other real buildings around, and every time I do that, and I do that because I'm always curious to what type of speeds a driver could expect if they were using any of these things. And T-Mobile has they covered 99% of highways and interstates with 5G. You say, okay, well, why is that important? Well, that's number one, where your drivers are going, but you also have, we've already named the GPS tracking device, right? The tablet, the dash cam, maybe a router, maybe an asset tracker. And so there was a lot of things that were, in times past, a GPS unit might just need to ping a couple times an hour or a minute, but when you start talking about navigation, or if you start talking about recording video, that's where that 5G connectivity is important, right? How is your driver using all of these things? Is he having connectivity issues, which could cause frustration, right? That make him less likely to use any of the devices, and in the trucking industry, we always talk about, there's a shortage of drivers, and driver retention is a really big issue. And I think picking the right carrier for all of this technology is very important, because this is the tool that they have to use every single day. You want it to be reliable. You want them to for them to have the adequate speeds to be able to do all of the different things that are now a part of their process, right? You want them to have ease of use with those things. And so T-Mobile can do that. The T-Mobile network leads in every major customer experience category nationwide, whether that's download speeds, upload speeds, latency, coverage. And so I think that's really important to look at. They've spent over $30 billion over the last 4 years deploying this network nationwide, and in the areas that matter most for the trucking industry, on the interstates and highways. Can you stay connected the whole time with very little downtime? And are the speeds what they need to be for them to be able to do their job um, while they're on the road, right? And so what T-Mobile has already done is I think amazing. And in my own personal experience, like I said, as I drive around and I do these speed tests, it's held true to the map that you see, online if you go to look at T-Mobile coverage. But what we're doing with Starlink, I think, is dramatically going to impact the trucking industry. And for those that don't know, T-Mobile has an exclusive partnership with Starlink. We already have the low orbit satellites. They started going up late last year, and they're expecting for now. Now, keep in mind, it's initially direct to cell. So with a cell phone that you have in your hand today, like I have the iPhone 14, within the next, say, 9 to 12 months or so, T-Mobile I'll have that direct to cell capability, eliminating dead zones anywhere in the United States. And so that's an exclusive partnership. I think it's really exciting for the trucking industry because, once again, when you're choosing the product that you're going to take with you on the road, that'll answer that question for you right there as far as who's the network to go with, and it'll be T-Mobile.
Yeah, and I think, and if I could jump in real quick, I know T-Mobile from a global standpoint, and from a global standpoint, you guys have probably by hands down the best network. So it's really cool to hear, all the investment that T-Mobile's made, into domestic network and everything else, and the Starlink is really impressive as well.
Yeah, and it's laid out like the T-Mobile network. We like to say that it's laid out like a 3-layered cake. And with a bit of history, Sprint owned an incredible amount of spectrum. Or since we're talking about the transportation industry, we'll call them, highways, right, or lanes. But we're never really able to capitalize on it for a lot of different reasons. So when T-Mobile came in, they really put them to use. And we say that this 3-layered cake, the biggest part of the bottom is our ability to cover our customers in 5G. Then we have capacity on top of that. How many people can we have on one tower at one time to be able to deliver the top layer, which are the internet speeds? And so those are the 3 components that, could, no matter the where you are in the country, big city, small town, out on the interstate, we're able to keep you covered in that way. That investment was made a long time ago. T-Mobile now has that power, and they were able to deploy it during COVID kind of quietly over the last couple of years. And so now, once again, as your driver has all of these new tools and applications that he's using to submit reports, for you to be able to, get that dash cam back footage, which, as a safety director, how important that is to get that footage back as soon as possible if there is an incident. T-Mobile is able to do that with ease.
So if you're a trucking company and you're wanting to purchase some new technology, what's the best route for them to do that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And for safety directors out there, and I guess my thoughts go immediately to them and how they have to choose vendors today. And generally, when a safety manager, when they go to look at something, number one, I believe the safety managers are constantly bombarded with different vendors in this area. A lot of their information is provided publicly, and so they're working directly with the vendors. I think, finding a technology broker such as yourself, like Teleconnect, someone who represents several different vendors, but that understands the industry and can work directly with that safety director, and they can come to you and say, Billy and Ryan, this is the problem that we're trying to solve. Can you help me do it? And you go out and, you're able to look at the different vendors, find the product to bring back and put in front of them, to already know the questions that need to be asked, right? From having worked with different companies and different vendors alike. I think that's the best way to go about it. Because there's a lot of people in the field now, right? If you go onto the FMCSA website, there's 10 pages of different ELD providers. Well, where do you even begin to start looking at those? And where do you even begin to start, looking at your list and seeing, well, what is it? Does this company have what I need? As opposed to sitting down and saying, okay, well, this is the problem that I'm trying to solve. I can't look at all of these vendors. I also don't want all these vendors contacting me. You can kind of take that unbiased approach and say, okay, well, this is, address it from the problem, as opposed to just pushing one specific product or pushing your customer into a product. You're able to look at all of them and find the best one for them, right? I guess, in most, I believe, having worked directly with safety directors, that a lot of them do not know that there are services like yours are available. And, Billy or Ryan, maybe how is it that you go into a company right now with some of the services that you have, and when a customer gives you a problem or a problem to solve and they need technology to solve it, how do you go about selecting a vendor, and what does that process look like?
So I mean, that's a great question, and it's one of the great attributes of having someone like Teleconnect, like Billy and I around, is that the one thing you point out is, like, we are carrier agnostic. We're not trying to pigeonhole someone into a certain product that kind of works. No, we want to find the solution that works perfectly for that particular business, because no business operates exactly the same way, even if they're in the same vertical. You mentioned, you have a lot of trucking experience. A food distributor is going to be a lot different than, say, a tire distributor, and their processes, what they care about, their products. So we sit down, learn the business, learn, like you said, the ins and outs, the problems, the pain points. And when we come up with a solution, we could become the solutions architect in that scenario, an extension of that safety officers, IT managers, CFO, CEOs, back office, extension of their back office. So we could do a lot of the legwork, a lot of the research for them, and compile a condensed report and say, here's your top 3 vendors. We have no dog in the hunt as far as which one you pick. The carriers all pay us. So there's really no loss, or nothing lost, or nothing terrible as far as working with a Teleconnect versus someone directly like yourself. So technology is our business, so they can focus on their business.
Exactly. And, in the trucking industry, there's, and I've seen the emergence of positions like the director of technology and things of that nature, which I think is great. But, because of the nature of what the products are, and around that time of the ELD mandate, all of those, these technology products got placed really on the safety department, sometimes in operations, and every business is different, but it's not the main job, of a safety director to select those vendors, even though they have to, right? In a lot of other industries, they have an IT department or some type of technology staff that kind of takes care of that for the rest of the business. But in a trucking company, whether you have 5 trucks, 100 trucks, 500 trucks, at the end of the day, the safety department and operations are using those products. But, once again, there's so many different components that you have to look at. That's where I think positioning yourself, Teleconnect, and working with a company like Teleconnect that can do some of that for you and gather the information and bring it down and present it to you, saying, okay, well, this is, we needed to solve a problem with, routing, right? Like we need better GPS navigation, or, we just need to operate with more efficiency when it comes to how we purchase fuel and things of that nature, right? For you to be able to go out to the different vendors, look at what they have and bring it back to them, I think it just really simplifies the safety manager's job in selecting a vendor, where they can go back to worrying about things like driver retention or just any aspect of compliance. Those are the things that they really care about. Recruiting, right? Those are the things that they want to spend their time on. And because there are so many different ones out there, you almost need one. You almost need a technology broker to come in and say, hey, we're the experts in this field. These are our recommendations. And then once again, like you said, let the customer choose at that point. But it's I don't think that it's widely known that there's guys like y'all that are available, which is why I think it's so great that we're able to do things like this to inform everybody, because it really could help simplify the process of choosing a vendor to work with any of these things.
Anything to add, Ryan?
No, I think that's great. I mean, we're basically an insurance agency in a sense. If you're trying to find an analogy or something similar, or State Farm, Progressive, it doesn't matter who it is. We're really just here outside looking in to find unique solutions for that. Get back on the transportation piece. I found it interesting that, or not interesting, but you talk about driver retention, Micheal, and how that's been a big thing. And it seems like a lot of the technology is even kind of pivoting, or not pivoting, but including the drivers more. Are they sleepy? Hey, can someone pop them on the phone and say, hey, Mike, you're looking a little tired. Let's go ahead and call it a night. Maybe you saved his life, and maybe some others on the interstate.
Yep.
So I think that's really cool. Or even just, the decrease in costs, insurance premiums, and everything else with all this technology is involved. Cost of living's going up. We have that. Perhaps, if you fall into that whole, driver retention, maybe you can give your drivers a little bit of bump raise, while you're being more productive and streamline processes. So it's very interesting on that point, how that's kind of become, even the technology is grasping that piece, the people piece of it, and including them, not just an asset, not just a trailer, not just a truck.
Yeah, you brought up two really good points there. You brought up insurance and driver coaching or incentivizing the drivers. And I would say that the most successful trucking companies find a way to use the fleet management system to incentivize their drivers. So through T-Mobile, we provide a product called GeoTab, and GeoTab provides a driver safety scorecard. And that driver safety scorecard takes all the different components of safe driving, whether that's harsh braking, speeding, all of those things, and they take all the different incidences and they put it into a tiered system. So we're going to take these 5 driving habits and we're going to incentivize our drivers by saying, okay, when you meet this threshold, you get a safety bonus, right, every month. I've seen that a lot of companies are doing that now.
Yes.
I think that's it's just a really helpful way to implement some of the other processes that you may be trying to change, or behaviors that you might be trying to change. And then the second thing is, you mentioned insurance, and that's something that has been really interesting to watch over the last few years, is how insurance companies have started looking and utilizing this technology as well. We talked about dash cams. There was this in the beginning. I think it was easier for trucking companies to embrace the cameras because it followed the ELD, but there was apprehensiveness to both. And what we found is that, there was always a worry from drivers that they maybe would be found more liable because they had a dash cam if they were doing something wrong. But what we see now is that it actually exonerates drivers more often than not, because the drivers are the professionals, right? This is what they do for a living, and they're driving with a bunch of people around them that don't, right? So, I've seen the footage of different incidences that have happened that, had the camera not been there, there's just no way that you would have thought that it wasn't the driver's fault. But watching the video, it was clearly not the driver's fault in that incident. And that's what immediately when there's an accident and there's an accident report filed, having that video right there on the spot to even just show the officer can be all the difference in a lawsuit, right? Is how that
Right,
officer
saving
writes up
on
the report.
yeah, not only saving on insurance premiums, but cutting down on insurance fraud as well.
Oh, exactly. And it is, and a lot of insurance, though it's not required, a lot of insurance companies now, we just there was a brand new hauling company, dirt hauling company that had got a new truck, and the insurance company asked for proof that they had a camera. I don't know all the ins and outs of why they asked for the proof, but what I do know is that that's very different than what it was 5 or 6 years ago, right? So, but when, as I think now is the time to think creatively about your fleet management system. Dots on a map was the year 2000 or so when GPS started, when GPS or fleet management kind of popped up in the market. And we are a long way from that now. We're connected into the engine of the truck. We can tell what's happening when that check engine light comes on well before a mechanic can. We can get that information to the mechanic. The whole maintenance process can be automated with the right fleet management system, from knowing what the issue is to inventorying the parts, to ordering the parts and scheduling the driver to come back in. It's come a long ways in the last 10 years. And I think where companies are at now, they are at the place where they're saying, what else can I do with it? What processes can I automate? How can I improve the driver's experience? How can I retain my drivers using the technology? And how can we save on costs, which there's an infinite number of ways, whether that's through the data that the fleet management system is gathering, or that's the video that exonerates your driver. Those things are important, and it's changing the industry completely. I think really that the automation of getting that data back, being able to communicate with your driver, all of those things have really allowed for companies to do more with the trucks that they have.
So, I want to be mindful of everyone's time, but if you have do you have any final thoughts before we close for the?
No, I would just say that I've personally, like I said, I invite, I invite anyone who sees this to reach out to you because y'all are professionals in this area. I personally have enjoyed working with y'all to solve problems. And, I think that, as anyone that's watching this, as you start thinking about, what technology products do I have coming up this year? I think, how can 5G help me? And how can 5G help my drivers? Should be top of mind because there's things today that you can do with the speeds that are available today and the coverage that's available today that weren't around maybe the last time that you bought some of this technology. So I think that there is a big improvement in what's been done with the network since COVID. So what you're able to do today, it allows you to be more creative because you are able to do more things today than you were then. So, that was just kind of my final thought as we've been chatting here for the last few minutes.
Okay, so I want to thank you, Micheal, for joining us, and Ryan, and thank everyone for attending. If you're watching this in a replay, feel free to reach out to me or Ryan for any questions you have.
Appreciate your time today. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys. It was fun.